Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be talking about two important topics. The first is in reference to what is going on regarding, of course, the political situation of the country. And this is important, especially in terms of what has happened yesterday in the investigation by the JIT that's looking into what the PTI chairman, Imran, has been talking about for quite some time now. And this is also important, especially in terms of the kind of allegations that have been leveled against the senior military leadership, including a senior military officer, which is something that has been part of a lot of discussions that have been spoken about the current PTI chairman regarding allegations of assassination attempts against him, and then also, of course, with reference to conspiracy against the party. This is important, especially in terms of the questions that were raised, particularly in terms of the evidence that is there, which in earlier press conferences and video clips the PTI chairman has claimed is something that he does have. But as part of his JIT yesterday, he spoke about how this is not something that he actually possesses, but that if there was an independent justification, he would prove that in fact the senior military leadership or the intelligence officer is actually involved in the current scenario. So we're going to be taking a look at what all of this means, and of course with regards to what the Interior Minister has also spoken about regarding the politics of PTI and how a lot of what has happened has affected the way that the people of Pakistan have started to perceive the military leadership, especially in the aftermath of the incidents of May 9th. And the Interior Minister also spoke about how there is evidence that is linking those incidents with the leadership of PTI, something that was reiterated in the past as well by the Punjab IG. And this is important also in terms of the political dynamics that the country is now witnessing, with the budget announced and the kind of economic crisis that the country faces and the political instability. And then, of course, in the aftermath of May 9th, the exodus of party leaders from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and the formation of a new party under the leadership of Mr. Jahangir Tareen may impact the kind of evolving dynamics that we will be seeing in Pakistan, particularly in the pre-election scenario. The Interior Minister has clarified that there is going to be no electoral alliance and that the PML-N is not seeking for any such alliance also. But we'll, of course, explore that further in terms of what the party plans to do and what is the future of the PTI moving ahead, and how the perception that has been built and the kind of rhetoric that was part of the PTI as a narrative is now going to be dealt with, and what is going to be the consequences of that. So we're going to take a look further into all of this in our first segment. Our next segment is going to also focus what is happening internationally, particularly in the neighborhood. One, that's of course, especially when we know there is a lot of propaganda regarding the kind of impact that has been created by the BJP regarding its Hindutva ideology, and then of course the kind of crackdown that there is on any sort of dissenting voices and any sort of freedom of expression, and that comes into a lot of contention, especially in terms of social media platforms such as Twitter, which of course talk about how they raise the flags of freedom of speech. And this is the kind of question that was asked by the co-founder and former CEO as well. And he has spoken about the challenges that he has faced from various governments, and especially that of India, which he cites is an important democratic country, which is making requests regarding the protests of the farmers movement, and then of course any sort of journalist who is critical of the government's measures and have asked for their accounts to be removed. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of rift that we have seen in the past between India and Twitter, and the way that it impacts not just the social media platform, but what it is reflective of in terms of what is going on within India as well, and the kind of policy dynamics that it sets up. It is also important to be able to see that perhaps under the leadership of Mr. Elon Musk, the difference is also stark in the way that we have looked at the kind of given the kind of leverage that is being there regarding the political government, especially India as well, which Elon Musk has also categorically stated himself, is saying that if there was an option of choosing between going to prison and giving in to demands, that is what he's going to go ahead with. So we'll talk more about what this means and what responsibility exists with regards to social media platforms regarding freedom of speech, and then of course what is as expected from the BJP and the kind of behavior that we have seen in the past, and what it's going to lead to in terms of any possible change within the country. For this and more, as always, we've not in the studios, but just by habit, we have been joined by, of course, our senior analyst and our in-house expert, Mr. Farrukh Pitafi, all the way from Quetta. And we've also been joined online by Rana Maqbool, Ahmed Saab, Senator, PML-N, regular on our show, as well as in the studios by Barrister Safi Ghauri, who's a political analyst and legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion. Rana Saab, let me begin with you with reference to what is going on. We have seen a lot of discussion regarding the impact that there is, especially in the aftermath of May 9th, on the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and the kind of evidence that perhaps exists that links this to a sort of mastermind or the planners behind the incidents of May violence. But it also, of course, points fingers towards the kind of narrative and rhetoric we've seen in the past coming in, especially from the current PTI chairman. And now we've seen that the way that the evidence was spoken about, there is a difference in what has been said with reference to the joint investigation team probing into this, where the claims that the PTI chairman had previously made regarding having evidence against the senior military officer that he has blamed in the past, he now says he does not have them. But at the same time, he also speaks about how if there was an independent investigation, he can actually prove that he is right. What do you think this means?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sana, actually, the person who is now facing this prosecution, he has been always resorting to lies from day one. As we have been already discussing with in this program, that he is a man of hallucination. He lives in utopia. He doesn't live in the real world, unfortunately. And you might remember once he leveled the allegations against the senior army officers, and he had been crying that the case has not been registered. So what the case was not registered? Number one, it was his government. Pervez Ali was the chief minister. They could have easily got the case registered, and case was not registered. Okay, the case was not registered. They should have gone to the High Court to file a writ petition. That case is not being registered. High Court would have ordered for the registration of case. Number three, there was an option available, which is faster than the ordinary case. If he had applied in the trial court and lodged a complaint, it is called complaint case. If he would have lodged a complaint in the court, trial court, his complaint would have been heard before the story of the prosecution. The story of the prosecution, which is based on investigation, it's put on the left on the back burner once there is a complaint by any complainant. He had a core of lawyers. He knew all these things, and he also knew that he was telling lies. Therefore, he didn't approach the proper forum. So it's absolutely incorrect whatever he has been saying. No, he has confessed before the joint investigation team that he doesn't have any proof, he doesn't have any evidence, and it's just he was out for labeling slanderous allegations against the senior army officers. So that is all about him, and he is totally incoherent and an idiosyncratic character. He is not to be believed. And for the same reason, once the trial starts, I think he'll suffer in that trial because his position is not based on truth. As far as you have mentioned about the latest episode, the tragic episode of May 9th, there is abundant evidence against him, which is connecting him with the occurrences at various places, because there were proper, thorough preparations were made. The men who were deputed, they were thoroughly briefed, and they were tasked to go for this sabotage. And not only this, there is an evidence that the confessional statements of those people, which is absolutely permissible under law, is strong evidence, those are there. So there is no question, and there is an electronic evidence. There are forensic pieces of evidence. There is graphic evidence. So there is, as I have mentioned, abundant evidence. I don't think so that he will be spared once the trial starts. So he may resort to gimmicks as usual, but it will not work this time. This is what is writing on the wall.
Okay, and I'll explore that further in detail. But before that, Barrister Safi, I want to also talk about how the PTI chairman keeps on speaking with reference to how he wasn't really allowed to, or he didn't have the opportunity to actually follow the legal course regarding his allegations against the senior military officer, that he wasn't able to also register an FIR. Exactly what sort of nuances exist there? Could the PTI chairman have done all of this regardless, and that what he's speaking about in terms of the hindrances were not actually something that was stopping him from doing so? And also, when we take a look at the kind of statement that has been made by him with reference to the JIT today, and if it is proven indeed that there is no evidence with regards to any senior military officer or intelligence officer, then what are the repercussions for somebody talking about any accusation? Because we've seen politicians and other leaders make claims in the past as well, and many just say whatever they feel like saying for a political mileage or gain and get away with it. Do you think that there is going to be some sort of consequence, and there is actually provision for that?
Thank you very much, Sana. And Sana, it's really funny what Imran Khan is saying right now. I'll echo what Rana Saab just said. There is unlimited amounts of legal recourses that Imran Khan had an FIR not been registered. So for instance, every lawyer, one of the first things that they read is a provision of law called 22A of the CRPC. Everybody knows it at the back of their hands. This is a fairly standard thing in Pakistan. You go to a police office, police officer is not cooperating, maybe he's asking for a bribe, he's not registering the FIR. You go straight to the court, you say, hey, hello judge, I have a cognizable case, please ask this police officer to register an FIR. We see thousands of 22A cases on a daily basis. I think my own law firm does close to maybe like 100 a month, because that's how common it is. But even that is a far-fetched idea for Imran Khan, simply because Imran Khan is simply the most broadcasted man in Pakistan. He is, you know, when he talks, when he speaks about anything, when he tweets, he is the most followed man in Pakistan. Imagine if Imran Khan had gone and said that such and such police officer in such and such police station is refusing to file an FIR. That would have led to such an outrage. Ask him, if he's so certain that there was not an FIR registered, ask him which police station did he file a complaint to. Show us a copy of the complaint. I'm absolutely certain there is none. I think this is just something that he created because he had nothing else to say. And that's what the problem is. The problem is that Imran Khan just randomly makes things up. He has this habit of creating fictions that then turn into a reality for him. He's so used to this. He created a fiction of that whole cipher case of USA going against him. There was a huge number of people who just believed him. They just gulped it down. They're like, yes, absolutely, there's a massive conspiracy. So the man, because he has a cult following, he has a bunch of people who would take any word that he says to be the undisputed truth, that he continues to take advantage of that. And I think increasingly we continue to see that this is a reflection of his mindset. One evidence that is obviously not come out there, and by no stretch of imagination am I suggesting that this is a line of events that happened, but I strongly remember everything that happened on May 9th. So I'll just, if you allow, I'll take you through some of the events that I recall, and this is my personal opinion of how things would have played out. So when the police first went to arrest him, I remember, and these are all records, Imran Khan said that if he's arrested, he is making a committee of 6 people. Those 6 people were to be headed by Ijaz Chaudhry, and he said that these people have been told what needs to be done if I'm arrested. And this committee of 6 people, which included Ijaz Chaudhry and Gannapur and Yasmin Rashid and Murad Saeed and some other people, this was put before the country and said, these will be your leaders if something were to happen to me. So we know for a fact that Imran Khan said something to them. We don't of course know what it is. Now what we do know, the next thing that happened is that on May 9th, when he eventually does get arrested, we have audio recordings of telephonic conversations of Ijaz Chaudhry telling the people to go and attack the GHQ, to go and attack the Corps Commander House in Lahore. Now whether this was a direct instruction which Imran Khan had referred to earlier when he had said that Ijaz Chaudhry knows what is to be done, Whether that is what it is, or whether this is just a conjecture at this stage, nobody knows. The fact also remains that we have recordings from Yasmin Rashid. Once again, these are audio recordings, they do not carry legal weightage, so I'm not going to necessarily insist that they are correct, but they have not been rebutted by PTI. That's important. Ijaz Chaudhry has not said that these are fake audio recordings. Yasmin Rashid has not said that these are fake audio recordings. So Yasmin Rashid, once again, speaking to workers and saying that this is on instructions from the top. From the top in PTI definitely means Imran Khan. There is nobody who has any other authority in PTI other than Imran Khan. It's a one-man show. It's practically a dictatorial, feudalistic party. And given that scenario, given that we have Yasmin Rashid who is admitting and telling the workers that this is the instruction, given that we have Ijaz Chaudhry who's telling workers what to do, and subsequent to that an attack was carried out, I believe that this constitutes at least circumstantial evidence, if not sufficient direct evidence. And of course the law enforcement agencies are going to look into what that evidence is, and Imran Khan is very clear. He knows what has happened, and so we can expect him to concoct increasingly imaginative stories of how foreign powers are involved, how he's the Messiah who's being prevented from stopping the Antichrist. God knows what's going to come next. We should fasten our seatbelts and expect something along the lines of Jim Jones, because I expect nothing less.
All right. Farrukh, I'd like to take your take on this as well with reference to what is going on, especially what we've seen in the past and the impact that the kind of statements that we've seen coming in from the PTI chairman has had, not only with regards to party politics or the political domain of the country, but also the kind of repercussions that it has had on the people at large and the way that they view important institutions, especially the sacred institutions. I understand that there is a cult following and that there are followers who are still able to defend whatever it is that it has been proven against the PTI chairman as well, but regardless of that, they stick to the stance that has been given earlier as well, and they may so do now as well. But when we look at the incidents of May 9th, of course it's a black day in Pakistan, and when we see that this may have been something that has happened due to the way that the people have perceived what has been coming in terms of the kind of information and allegations from the PTI chairman, then of course if there is planning involved as well, that this is something that has serious repercussions for not just limited to the short-term period, but also in the longer sense where people still stick to whatever beliefs or ideas that they may have. How will that responsibility be then taken up with the PTI chairman?
Right, Sana, this is a very interesting question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand Barrister Safiullah's methodology, especially looking at how many times the chairman of PTI has actually made certain claims, and those claims were actually proven wrong, or later on he actually backtracked from that. That is not all. When Barrister Sahab was saying that he is perhaps the most broadcasted man in Pakistan, let me also remind you that he is probably the most, such a person who has been given the maximum relief by the courts, right? How many other, have been given this many, release from arrest and bails for that matter, and repeatedly? How many of us have actually been apprehended, remanded, and during remand, Supreme Court of Pakistan convened and just let us go or let that person go? It doesn't happen. So for that person who actually has this kind of influence over the country's superior courts, to say that an FIR was not registered that he wanted to, I don't think that was the case. I think his own chief minister was really reluctant to offend anybody, because in the end he knew there wasn't any evidence. Regarding inconsistencies of Imran Khan Saab's statements, why only stop at May 9th? Just remember what kept on happening before. Remember 2014 when he used to talk about Panthi puncture, and when in the evening and in the morning he would continuously keep on lambasting Najm Sethi and the Prime Minister, now Prime Minister, the then Chief Minister of Punjab, and umpteen other people, right? and with all that, in the end, when he was asked to actually convince the audience with evidence, he said that was merely a political statement. Similarly, Cypher, similarly, all these accusations against so many people. So what I feel at this time, at this moment, is that somehow, because every time he kept on, going with these excesses, they were tolerated. He was mollycoddled. Because of that, he got so emboldened. He thought that he can get away with anything. In the past, whenever, although you attributed to the cult following, I would merely say that there is a lot of effort or power and money that also goes into how he operates, right? In the past, whenever he made a statement, there were people in the media, there were people on the social media, even in our offices around us, who would actually start fighting us because they thought that it is correct. And there was an agenda involved. And somehow something has flipped, Sana. And that would tell you that there were forces that Imran Khan Sahib was using whose support he doesn't have now. And that's why he seems to have gotten away with a lot, gotten emboldened, and in the end it has all backfired. Now what he's doing is it is clear that he used certain people, and there might be certain people like former First Lady who might have used him in politics. But the people whom he used and who are actually languishing in jails right now, he totally abandoned them. And the people who actually exploited him, he is trying to defend him even today. And that is not all. The way he has been operating, I think in the coming days he is going to further complicate things for himself. So I have no doubt about it that he is going to be held accountable for every action he has taken and for how misguided his approach has been. Because there are people, there are institutions you don't want to attack, and in the end he ended up offending everybody.
The evidence is going to have value in the courts, and it's important also in terms of the kind of evidence that is being pointed at regarding May 9th by the Interior Minister, by the IG Punjab. And this is important, especially in terms of where the investigation is actually going to lead to. We know that the statements coming in from the political and military leadership talk about how there needs to be consequence, how there needs to be a tightening of the noose around the planners and mastermind behind this. And if there is political involvement, especially with regards to the current PTI chairman, then when we take a look at this entire situation, what in terms of evidence will then be the prerequisites of actually establishing this link between the person who is committing the act of May 9th and the violence and is present on the streets to the PTI chairman?
Right. So in order to connect anyone or to show that there has been any crime, there are two legal requisites. One is to show mens rea, which is to show that there was an intent to cause such a crime, and the second is actus reus, which is to show that there was such an act. Now we of course know that there was an act, that is undisputed. We of course know who the people were who committed that act. There is plenty of video footage, and many important people from within PTI, such as the former chairman Imran, the present PTI chairman's nephew, who burnt a military uniform and they're currently in hiding, running away as fugitives of the law, not around, suggests that they were definitely involved in said acts, because they are not even willing to give themselves up to the process of law. Now the real difficult question is establishing whether there was an intent. Intent can be proven by a variety of means. One mean is, as already has been mentioned, confession. If there is a confessional statement that says, yes, I was involved, I did in fact do this, then there is no doubt about the intent. We know that it was intended and it was carried out. The second means of establishing intent is through circumstantial evidence, through the testimony of other witnesses, and through recordings. Now the problem with these recordings is that they have to meet a very high standard of evidence. This is not an ordinary thing in Pakistani law. The Qanun-e-Shahadat has very difficult set of standards that they've established for digital evidence that include audio and video recordings, and they need to be proven. It needs to be shown who recorded those videos. It needs to be shown who recorded those audios, that they have not been tampered with, that they have been presented in their entirety. And since in this particular case, some of the evidence is being presented in military courts, I have no doubts that this time around certain people will come forward. Normally, people do not come forward who have made such recordings, audio recordings, for instance. They wouldn't feel comfortable coming forward before civilian courts because it's a matter of public interest. People would know where that evidence came from. But in a military court, since there is not similar transparency, they would not have a problem with coming forward because their names would not be exposed to the public, and they might feel comfortable showing and sharing before a judge who that person was, why they made those audio recordings, and if those audio recordings can in any manner then be rebutted. So evidence is going to definitely come forward, and I think evidence has come forward, Sana. I think there is a very, very good reason why 150 people who are MPs and MNAs, the leadership of PTI, why they have jumped ship.
Right.
It's a fairy tale to believe that all of them were somehow tortured and harassed, that PTI would want you to believe. That could not have happened to every single one of them. There's a huge number of people who have left. And I think the reason why these huge number of people are leaving is because they are being confronted with evidence. They are being shown what it was, and they are being then asked, are you sure you want to support such a party? And you can see this from their press conferences. They come forward.
Does that absolve them of the responsibility for Mainan?
If they were not, of course, active participants in the act of it, and if they were simply members of PTI, of course it absolves them. If you need to be participating in the crime itself to be considered a criminal. You can't be considered a criminal by means of association, and either you should have carried out the act or aided and abetted the act in some manner. Otherwise, I don't see why the law would unnecessarily prosecute innocent people.
All right. Rana Saab, the situation when we take a look at the people who have left the PTI is important, especially in terms of what is now emerging from those people, and of course with reference to a new party that has also sprung up under the leadership of Mr. Jahangir. I understand what the Interior Minister spoke about earlier with reference to PML-N not looking for any electoral alliance, but especially in terms of how political dynamics change and the kind of sentiment that we've seen in the past coming in from the PDM and the PML-N has been centered around the individuality of the PTI chairman and not more so with the other party leaders. Why is it that this option is not on the table with reference to Mr. Jahangir Tareen's party or the rest of the PTI for that matter? And then what do you think possibly is the future with regards to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf then, especially in terms of the reported failure of the options that have been presented by the PTI vice chairman to the current PTI chairman?
Sana, I may add a little to the voice is resounding. It's not properly being relayed. The situation evidence
well.
only I want to have say a few words about the evidence.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, if there's audio or video evidence is there, Barrister was right. It's difficult to prove that as per the Evidence Act. But if there is abundant corroboratory evidence available, such as he has mentioned the circumstantial evidence and the sonographic evidence, and then such pieces of evidence can support the contention of the prosecution. Therefore, this is a proven case for all practical purposes as far as evidence doesn't look to be fallible in this case. Now, why these people are not being co-opted or welcomed by PML-N, we already discussed in the last meeting as well with you that they have an announced policy as far as the party leader and the Qaid of the party is concerned, that we are not going to entertain anybody from outside as far as the PTI, the dissidents are concerned. The reason being that there is no vacancy available with the Muslim League, especially in Punjab, because there are already sitting candidates who had been MNAs and MPAs. It's very difficult for any party to decline the tickets to them because they have been with the party for the last about 30, 35 years, and they have undergone lot many tribulations and lot many difficulties and tortures and predicaments. So the party is not prepared to refuse the ticket to anybody whosoever has been with the party for the last so many decades. Therefore, there's very little hope for these people to come into the party. Yes, as far as understanding with them is concerned, maybe 1 or 2 seats where we think that our candidate is not health-wise very well, he has gone old or some other reason, so we'll be able to accommodate 1 or 2, 3 persons, but not en bloc at all. So this is the reason. But as far as the PTI's fate is concerned, you have mentioned about that. That's writing on the wall. They will not be able to perform in the elections because, first of all, they have to get cleared in the cases, because there's not many cases against them, against their leadership, against the local leaders as well, and against their workers and against their diehards. So it becomes very difficult for a party. For example, the main man who is responsible for all this humbug cannot contest the election for all practical purposes. How would he be able to contest the elections? Do you think all these arrangements are being made? The government will allow him to contest the elections? He will not be, because if the case starts, and it will be decided within 15 days, not more than that, 3 weeks or at the most one month, because this has to be very quick trial for that practical purposes. You must understand that. Therefore, PTI's participation or role will be very little as far as the coming elections are concerned. Now it will be a battle between the People's Party to a certain extent, because People's Party, for all practical purposes, doesn't have much of entrenchment as far as Punjab is concerned. They are coming back after a lot many years. Now it will be, perhaps what I understand, will be the supremacy of the PML-N as far as the coming elections are concerned. This is the scenario which is emerging as far as I understand.
All right, Farrukh, I also want to understand with reference to, of course, the future of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. We've seen in the past as well that a lot of that has been centered around one individual, but also especially in the aftermath of what has happened since May 9th and the emergence of a new party, and what we're hearing from reports coming in from the proposals by the PTI Vice Chairman, and especially now that there will be elections later this year as scheduled. What do you think will then be the future possibilities of PTI disintegrating into something which will only be a memory of a party and perhaps just an individual? We've seen the PTI chairman being adamant on how the party will stand as long as he stands, and understand that in terms of an individual supporting the party, you're talking about what all he brings to the table, but will that be enough to allow him to stay relevant in politics despite whatever is going on with the party?
Right, Sana, relevance is the most important question at this moment. Why? Because in the small gap of 1 year, we have seen that PTI's chairman has really maneuvered himself into a corner. The way he actually used the cipher myth and umpteen other things at that time, he was thought to be very popular. And one by one, he kept on throwing away all the leverages he had. Now he's gone, he has lost the leverage that he used to have with the media and eventually with the electorate as well. So I don't have any doubt that he is actually going to fade away. And I don't know, in the long run, there's always a chance. We have seen even more difficult situations or scenarios where people have actually staged a comeback. But for 4 or 5 years, especially this election, I don't see any chance of him bouncing back or being irrelevant even. Now, the new party that you were talking about, I believe that you're talking about IPP. But remember that there is another party that has actually seen groundswell of supporters and PTI defectors actually lining up at its door, and that is PMLQ. PMLQ seems to have also, garnered a lot of traction. And then there are other parties that might actually, right now we are looking at Punjab only, right? Then there's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So where does the muscle memory lead you? There were 2 parties that actually ruled Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the past. One was ANP, I haven't seen ANP actually putting in that kind of effort. But there's another, that is Jamaat-e-Islami JUIF combo, that was MMA. I don't think that that combo is going to be there, but Jamaat-e-Islami is really very active right now in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. What I am interested in is to see where does the former chief ministers from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa actually go. After that, we will be able to see whether there's going to be any future for PTI even in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now, I wanted to address the issue of evidences as well, because that is important. Remember that two things have been proven already. When it comes to the audio leaks and why there were tappings, already we have seen evidence, enough evidence on May 9th, that there was an attack on the state institutions, the state of Pakistan. If you are not convinced, just go to India, which is thought to be bigger democracy than Pakistan and more stable democracy, and try burning down a Corps Commander's house. And you will see what becomes of you, no matter how popular you are. Go to America and try doing that to any of the military leaders there. And let's see what happens to you then. Similarly, UK, elsewhere. So the point to be made here is that if there were tappings that were taking place, it has been proven that there was a reason why there was fear that there is going to be a conspiracy against the state of Pakistan. Now, regarding propaganda, the way Imran Khan Sahab or PTI or its chairman or others have been using propaganda is shameful. Let me give you an example. They kept on saying that elderly members of the party were arrested and then they were disrobed and insulted. Later on, after the main guy was arrested and he was freed, after that they kept on saying that their female activists were under attack, physical attack or some kind of sexual attack. But amazingly, they very easily skirted over the possibility or the leader himself actually being treated in the same way. Why? Because, of course, this is propaganda and this is a male chauvinist society, so I cannot project that I was weakened somehow. With that kind of standards, let me ask you, who does it to people who have been supporting you through thick and thin? Those people who are still in jail, and you are actually attaching stigma to their names just to get cheap attention from the masses.
Valid point that you
with
raised
that kind of politics. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's really important, and of course something to think about, especially with reference to where the political dynamics of PTI have led the country, and of course the political arena as well, and who all is responsible for that. And it's interesting to look beneath what is being shown as well to try and understand what really is going on. We're now going to be taking a look at what is happening in the neighborhood as well, especially with reference to India and the impact that this is having with reference to freedom of speech within the country. Again, something that we are aware has been talked about a lot internationally as well, but despite the kind of evidence that is there, the BJP government still gets away with whatever actions they take against anybody who criticize them, including of course social media platforms such as Twitter, who have been approached by the government with regards to removing of accounts and also threatening them and their employees. This is something that has also come out recently in an interview by the former CEO and then of course the co-founder Jack Dorsey, who spoke about how this is coming in from India, which is such a big democracy. Barrister Safi, the institution in itself, the social media platforms are important in terms of the balancing act that they have to play, and this is what was questioned to Mr. Jack as well. But when we talk about the kind of responsibility that exists on governments and for them to allow the social media platforms to operate with reference to freedom of expression and speech, perhaps that's asking for too much from India and the BJP government. But then how will the role of the social media platforms be factored into this, when they also have to abide by the kind of rules that exist within a particular country or the kind of obligations the government expects them to, and then of course freedom of expression to their users?
Right. So this is all a very interesting story, Sana. And if we were to just take a step back and look at how Twitter changed the world and then how India changed Twitter is also fascinating. So Twitter being just a social media platform, one of the world's most popular social media platforms, no doubt, created history when it banned the former US President Donald Trump from Twitter. Now, here's the most powerful man in the world, and a company decides that, well, you know, he's saying something that we don't agree with, and they just decide to ban him. And that shook everyone, because that suddenly meant that there was a superiority of tech over nation states. And yet, we see that when Elon Musk took over Twitter, his first tweet was, "The bird is freed." And this is a very interesting tweet, for him to say that he has now freed Twitter. So if Twitter was freed by Elon Musk, and the fact that he immediately fired Gade Vijaya, who was the head of legal and policy, he immediately fired Agarwal, who was the CEO, and he fired a series of 16 Indians as the first step he took, while saying that he's freeing them. I think it's fairly clear what he was freeing them from. This was a concentrated effort by the state of India to take over the biggest technology platform, which they successfully did. They did so, they've penetrated into various other technology platforms, but with Twitter they were particularly successful. And we know that they used Twitter to wage an all-out war against all their enemies. Their enemies included Pakistan, where they continued to berate Pakistan for all sorts of human rights abuses. Pakistanis would get censored, Indians would not. They continued to wage a massive war against China. So I remember that when the takeover with Elon Musk happened, the biggest celebration came from China, where the trending emoji at that point was two cheers glasses clinking together, and Chinese people saying, yes, finally we are now free, now we can express ourselves. And any other kind of people who had opposed India. I remember very well that when Rihanna, the famous singer, just randomly said something along the lines of supporting farmers' protest, she was banned by Twitter. She was given warnings, and at a time when everybody was supporting the farmers' movement, Rihanna, because she was a public figure, was not allowed to. This shows the kind of control Indian government had over Twitter, and now that the control has been removed, the government is panicking. There was a very negative reaction by the government of India when the takeover by Elon Musk happened, and following that, Modi in fact tested the waters by making Twitter take down all references to the BBC documentary that was made against him, and Twitter complied. This was under Elon Musk. Twitter had to comply, but Modi continues to test further waters with not just Twitter but all other channels. If you remember, it was only at the beginning of this year that Modi also ransacked BBC offices for daring to speak against India and against Modi. Absolutely. So we see Hindutva at its peak. We see, of course, that Twitter cannot ignore this mass of Indian followers, because these are 26 million people. 26 million, that's a sizable number. They can't just afford to have 26 million people quit Twitter. That's what generates and keeps the social media platform running. And yet we see that this following and this vast membership is being exploited by India time and again. And it's really a matter of time as to whether technology companies will learn to stand up for themselves, whether they will decide that free speech absolutism, which they stand for, is more important than profits. This is yet to be seen. Maybe they will find other markets. And it's all a very interesting work in play, Sana.
Right.
I'm very curious.
Right, absolutely. And of course, there's so many other factors such as AI, which is also affecting the dynamics of how we're going to evolve. And then, of course, the way that international relations also play into this. And Rana Sahab, this is important, especially in terms of the kind of stance Pakistan has had regarding all of this. And we have been very vocal about what is going on within India and the way that India wants to curb dissenting voices. But especially when you have big names coming in who are looking after such big organizations all around the world, the kind of international accountability that exists and the way that international opinion impacts decision makers is also important. Is there something that we can actually do about this to make sure that there is movement across the world in terms of understanding what is going on by governments such as India who are trying to curb the voices of the people?
Yes, we must launch our meaningful and comprehensive program. This is a golden opportunity with Pakistan to fight back, because Pakistan has been continuously suffering at the hands of Indian nefarious propaganda. And I assure you, this Modi is also a type of a terrorist, and he's a killer of men, and he's so ruthless a person, and his party and organization is so ruthless. They are playing havoc with all other forms of people with other religions and with other sects, and they are absolutely atrocious with the fellow human beings, even Indian countrymen. And you might remember the scare and the fear is there with the people like from the world of art. You might have listened to the statement of Farrukh Khan many a time, and likewise other Shabana Azmi. And these people have been suffering, and they are scared of him. And his Chef Sena is creating havoc for the non-Muslim communities everywhere. May it be Manipur, may it be Gujarat, may it be Kashmir, may it be any other place. Okay, there is a long-standing hatred against the Muslims for obvious reasons. But what about the other communities? Why are they against? Because they say Muslims have been ruling India for 1200 years. There's a history to it. But what about the other communities, other minorities? Why are those ruthless?
Right, absolutely, Rana Sahab, and that's important. And sorry to interrupt, but we're short on time, and I also want to take Farrukh's take on this. Farrukh, I know you'll have something to add already, but also reflect upon two important issues. One, how will such platforms be able to balance in terms of what is really freedom of speech and what really is something which is concerning and should in fact be banned? And then secondly, how will we be able to transcend the possibility of actually moving ahead with protection of freedom of speech without having any sort of implication on the sovereignty of different governments?
We cannot, Sana. But let me be very honest. The way things are actually being flooded with misinformation and propaganda and censorship laws by various countries, I don't think that is even possible. But I won't sit here and allow the good name of certain people to be sullied. Earlier, I was listening to Barrister Safi, so I just wanted to clarify that he has more or less the chronology right, but some of the details wrong. For example, Jack Dorsey was actually running Twitter, and he was doing it according to his own principles, and India kept on pushing him to censor the platform, right? Indian government, by the way. And with him, the two people that he mentioned, Agarwal and the lady who was part of the content regulation policy, they stood with Jack Dorsey and they were not allowing that censorship to continue. Then what happens in India, if Twitter's offices are attacked and then social media laws are enforced. After that, because Jack Dorsey and these people don't actually cooperate, then there is an activist company that forces Jack Dorsey out, but somehow Agarwal is kept. Because Agarwal is kept, he kept on pushing back again. By definition, an Indian does not mean it is an Indian government's plant. So there, when Elon Musk came, he carried a sink with him and he was showing that you are sunk. And then he threw them out, and after that he has been cooperating more with the Indian government. If you think that Elon Musk is somehow a force of good, I'm sorry, I don't think so. So India keeps on censoring various platforms. Similar thing happened when there was a report on BBC. First an a Hindu conservative member accused the documentary makers of being Muslims or Pakistanis. And when he learned that that wasn't the case, there was some kind of manufacture of conspiracy against the chairman of BBC, who has been fired already. So India has that kind of power, and they keep on forcing people out, and it is because of people like Elon Musk that they have been able to do it. Jack Dorsey has actually told you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi for joining us, and thank you very much, Rana, Maqbool, for being part of the discussion. Fortunately, that's all we have time for, and we'll see you tomorrow.